Hey everyone, welcome to another top 10 list. This week's top 10 list is the top 10 most controversial notes that I have in my collection. Um, I don't know all the controversial notes, but whenever I hear a story about a note, I usually do my best to run out and buy that particular note. And of all the notes with stories, these tend to be the most controversial. So let's take a look at what I came up with for the top 10 most controversial notes in my collection. Number 10. I'm starting this one off with, you can see right here, the 1935 G $1 silver certificate. And this particular one, well, it's real nice, by the way, 64 ppq, and it's a star. But what makes this one so controversial is on the back. It is the first note to have "In God We Trust" printed on it. Now, some of you would think that's controversial, and maybe, but we'll get to that at another note, I'm sure. But what makes this controversial to me is the fact that this is a 1935 G. You can find 1935 Gs with the motto and without the motto. Now, you would think if it's a 1935 G, you can correctly assume that there is a 1935 A, B, C, D, E, F. Aside from the G, they also made an H. So, with all of these different series letters, why did halfway through the G series, why did they decide that was the time to add the motto and not in between any of the other series? So I always found that to be a head scratcher, and that's why I'm always fascinated by 1935G. I've got a couple with and a couple without the motto. To me, that's the controversy. Why would they do it halfway through? They should have made it its own series. Anyway, that's number 10 on the list. Number 9. This is going back a little ways. Let's see if we can read this up here. 18, can barely read that. 1870, what is that, 5? Series of 1875, maybe. Yeah, that's a tough one to read. Maybe it's 77, 78, 1878. Okay, what this is this is a state of Louisiana bond, known as the baby bond because of the picture here. Now, at this particular point in time, the federal government was printing notes. The federal government started printing notes in 1862. But Louisiana wanted to print their own money. Has more to do with the end of the Civil War and states' rights and stuff like that. But anyway, Louisiana wanted to print their own money, but for a state to print their own money, that was illegal. This was the state's workaround. Rather than printing money, they printed $5 bonds, and these bonds, you can see, had interest payments that you could redeem. So it was the state's own money. That way they didn't have to use U.S. money, like I said, bitter about the Civil War. And they got around the taxation by issuing it as a bond. Now, this was spendable like money, it had interest like a bond. But the controversy, well, that's pretty controversial in and of itself. The fact that this was a workaround because they didn't want to use U.S. money. Think about that next time you start thinking about people who, if you don't like the country, get out of here. Okay, well, here's the entire state of Louisiana giving the middle finger to the federal government, and this is their workaround for the paper money problem. And then, of course, karma took over, and it turns out that this guy here, what's his name, Bunker, E.A. Bunker, he was the one in charge of printing these. And he printed as many as he was supposed to, and then he printed another set for himself and ran off with the money. So it took them a while to figure out that these were no longer valid for what they thought they were, and that's why you find so many of them that are still unredeemed, because they printed twice as many as they were supposed to. So how's that for a little bit of controversy? That's number 9. Number 8. This is a 5-cent fractional currency. Fractional currency was put out during the Civil War because everybody was hoarding precious metals. Nobody wanted to spend precious metal. Everybody thought that it was doom and gloom, and if you didn't have gold and silver stacked, you weren't going to survive. Wow. I can understand that during the Civil War in 1862, but it's hard to believe people say that today in 2023. And people have said that every day since. Yeah, hang on, it's coming. Anyway, this is from the third series of fractional currency. Now, the first series was postal currency. Second series became fractional currency. By the time the third series came around, they are running out of ideas on who to put on there. The Secretary of the Treasury, Spinner, F.E. Spinner, decided he was going to put himself on one of the notes. And he also put his treasurer on one of the notes as well. And these two people went to the Bureau of Engraving and Printing and talked to Mr. Clark. Clark was in charge of the Bureau of Printing and Engraving. And Spinner and, I forget the other name right now, I'm sorry, but I don't have that note in front of me, decided that they wanted Clark, as in Lewis and Clark, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, the explorers, they wanted William Clark to be put on the notes. So they went to Clark, who was from the BEP, and told him Spinner was going on one, the Secretary of the Treasury was going on the other, and put Clark on another. So Mr. Clark didn't know that he was supposed to put William Clark on there, the explorer, and he put himself on there. And he's the one that got in trouble. So yes, even though he misunderstood the assignment, he did do what he was told and put Clark on the note. After this happened, then a law was passed that said no living person can be put on our money. It's funny how Spinner and the guy that I can't even remember get away with it, but Clark, he was the troublemaker. Yeah, funny how stuff rolls downhill, isn't it? Anyway, that is number 8. Number 7, one of the more fun controversial notes. This one is from 1880. It's a $10 legal tender. This particular one is known as the Jackass note. Kind of a vulgar name for a note. And why is it called that? Well, because of that awesome picture of an eagle that's on the bottom there. I've never gotten a straight answer whether or not this was intentional, but if you take this note and rotate it like so, let's see if anything comes to mind. I see a white snout, I see an eyeball, I see an ear, I see a mane. It's a donkey. That's right, it's a jackass. The eagle turns into a jackass when you hold the note upside down. Don't know if it was intentional or not, but it's there. You cannot deny that it's not there. And once you see it, when you turn it back over, it's hard to find the eagle again. You just tend to see the upside down jackass. So yeah, there's a controversial note. Was it done on purpose? I don't know. For those English majors, this is Daniel Webster. If that name sounds familiar, if you know, you know. I always think back to the story of the devil and Daniel Webster. Anyway, that's Daniel Webster, but that is the Jackass note, 1880 $10 legal tender. Number 7. Number 6. This was a pretty good year for controversy. What do we got here? Oh, no, this one is 1891, but I believe this one came out in 1880 to start with. And if I look at the back, yeah, this is the other back. Actually, 1886 was the first version of this that came out. This $10 silver certificate features Vice President Hendricks, who died in office in 1885. So in 1886, they put him on the $10 silver certificate, and this is called the Tombstone note because of the tombstone shape that surrounds his head. That gets to be kind of controversial because, well, most of the figures that are on our money, well, all of them at this point, are dead. And with the law passed that says only dead people can be on the money, using a tombstone shape, well, that's kind of like a double, you know? I mean, he's on the money, so you know he's dead. And then they put that around there. So that's kind of like a double whammy on there. So I don't know if there was supposed to be any kind of dig. I don't know if This shape was considered a tombstone prior to being on here, and that's how the note got its name. I'd think so, because you think of things like the cemetery at Boot Hill from like the 1850s. That's kind of what the tombstones would look like, aside from the crosses, of course. But yeah, that this is the tombstone note, and like I said, the question becomes, why would they actually put the tombstone image when everybody on notes are supposed to be dead? Anyway, that one is number, what is that, number 6? 10, 9, 8, 7. Yep, that's number 6. Number 5. This is an 1886 $5 silver certificate. It's actually from the same series as the 10. The 1886 Tombstone and the 1886 note here would have been the same, even though this one's 1891. The $5 silver certificate, that of course is Ulysses S. Grant on there. This note was controversial because of the back. The back of this note, this was called the Morgan back. Why? Because it's a $5 silver certificate with 5 silver dollars on the back. You can tell that it's from 1886, and they actually used an 1886 Morgan silver dollar. And that's the obverse, and of course you can see the reverses. The portion that makes this controversial is the fact that if you look real close, you can see that it actually says, "In God we trust," on the note. And this is the first time that a federal issued note actually had the words, "In God we trust." They did not put it on there again until the 1950s. Mainly because it's not constitutional. You cannot mix religion and government. Separation of church and state. One has nothing to do with the other. A lot of people will talk about our country was founded on that, and they would be 100% wrong. Our country was actually founded by people looking to escape the Church of England. They wanted the right to be able to worship anybody they wanted to worship, any way they wanted to worship. They did not want government telling them who to worship. So that's why it was so controversial to put "In God We Trust" on our money. Because as a citizen of the United States, you're not required to worship God or anybody. So you can't be forced to have that included in your life. It's kind of why you pay to have your kids go to a private school and why public schooling is free. The government will happily educate your children, but if you want to teach them a religion, well, then you got to pay for that. Anyway, 1886 $5 silver certificate, first note to ever feature the words "In God We Trust." That is number 5. Number 4. This is my $10,000 gold certificate, and this one makes the list not for the story. Those of you who know the story know that gold certificates were made illegal in 1933. All these were redeemed, and this one was part of a fire. And this note managed to get thrown out of a window with about 400 others. That's how it survives today. The controversial part about this note is the fact that everybody loves to tell me that any note issued by the government is still worth face value. That's what they tell you. And if you look on the website says the same thing. If you check out the BEP, any note that the U.S. government has printed is still worth face value. They love saying that. And the reason why they say that is because they are touting how long our government's been in existence, and they're touting the full faith and trust in our government to pay its debt. So that's why they say any note issued by the government is still worth face value. So why can't I take this to the bank and cash it in? It's worth $10,000. It was clearly government issue. But for some reason, they won't give me 10 grand for this note. In fact, every book I look at tells me this note's worth about $1,500, even though it's a $10,000 note. So much for every note being worth face value. If anybody wants to give me the 10 grand for this note, I will happily take it. Until that day comes, I guess my $10,000 bill is not worth $10,000. So I wish they'd just take that portion down, because it's a real $10,000 bill. So, I don't know what else to tell you. Anyway, that one is number 4. The 1900, let's see, there it is. 1900 $10,000 gold certificate. Number 3. This is from 1899. It's a $5 silver certificate, and this is the Chief Note. Chief running antelope. The Chief Note, one of the most beautiful notes out there, one of the more expensive notes to get in a decent condition. The controversy on this has to do with the headdress. The chief that they put on here, he posed for the etching, and they wanted him to wear a headdress, and they brought this particular headdress for him to put on. The problem is that wasn't his tribe's headdress. It was a rival tribe. So he wouldn't put it on. He was very upset that they wanted him to put on another tribe's headdress and wouldn't do it. So I'm not sure if they simply had another person put it on and finish the engraving that way, or how they pieced it together. But he would not wear it because it was not from his tribe. And I can completely understand that. And also knowing that this was 1890 something when it happened, that's not a surprise either. We only slightly improved our relations with Native Americans as of now, 125 years after this had been done. So yeah, no big surprise there, but still controversial. The fact that they made this Native American, they expected him to put on whatever looked good, not what actually represented him. That is number 3. Number 2. This is from 1923, $5 silver certificate. This one is known as the porthole, and it's called that because you have Lincoln looking through this round circle. Now, most notes didn't have a perfectly round circle encircling whoever was in the center. I mean, here's the chief, no circle there. We talked about the Tombstone, no circle there. Mr. Webster, no circle there. But this particular note does have the circle. And it looks like he's looking out of a porthole of a ship, which is how it got its name, the porthole note. That's not what makes it controversial. What does make it controversial is people didn't look at it as a porthole when the note came out. People were actually upset because to them, it resembled looking down a gun sight. Just put the crosshairs right here. Looking down a gun barrel at the president who was assassinated. And they found that to be rather offensive. So maybe the name porthole note came out to help subdue that. But we're talking 1923, and Lincoln was assassinated in 1865, 1866. So you're talking, 60 years, almost 60 years after the event, and people were still under the, still feeling that way about this particular event. So that is number 2, the porthole note from 1923. And number 1 this week, from 1896, it's a $5 silver certificate, part of the educational series. This is the note that got the entire series banned. The $5 note features front and center a partially dressed woman. And the prudes of the time said, "We will not carry pornography in our pockets." And the prudes of our time decided what the rest of us were allowed to see and do and how we were allowed to live our lives. Imagine a country full of people like that, telling everybody what to do, how to do it, what they can like, what they can't like, who they can be with, what their doctors can tell them. Imagine a country like that. Or you can imagine a country like we live in, the land of the free. So yeah, it's funny when you look at our stuff like that and what people say they represent versus what they actually represent. Me, I'm for freedom. Do what you want to do as long as you ain't hurting nobody. Don't mind what I'm doing. I don't mind what you're doing. But people had to stick their nose in, and we took a beautiful piece of currency like this, and we lost it. This came out in 1896, and by 1899, it was gone. Replaced by this one. There you go. 1896, 3 years later, 1899 for a $5 silver certificate. And it's just funny because after telling us what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do, they then told an Indian what he's allowed to do. It's Just amazing to see that stuff back to back. Anyway, that is number one, the $5 educational troublemaker note. If you learned anything new, go ahead and hit that like button. If you like what you see and you want to see more, please subscribe. Love reading all your comments. Guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.